Jey Uso's heartbreaking loss, the tragedy that shook WWE. Listen, I need you to sit down for this one because what we're about to discuss hits different. We're talking about real life crashing into the world of professional wrestling in the most devastating way possible. The bloodline might dominate inside that squared circle, but outside of it, they're human beings dealing with unimaginable pain. And before we dive into this heavy topic, make sure you smash that subscribe button and hit that notification bell, because WWE Extreme brings you the stories that matter, the moments that define legacies, and the truths that go beyond the scripted drama. Now let's talk about something that reminds us all that life can change in an instant. The wrestling world collectively held its breath when news broke that sent shockwaves through every locker room, every arena, and every fan's heart. Jey Uso, one half of the most decorated tag team in WWE history, found himself living through every person's worst nightmare. We're not talking about a storyline here, folks. We're talking about a tragedy that ripped through the AGONY family like a Category 5 hurricane, leaving nothing but devastation in its wake. The kind of loss that makes championship belts feel meaningless and makes you realize that all the pyrotechnics and entrance music in the world cannot prepare you for when reality comes knocking at your door with the worst possible news. For those who have followed the Usos' journey from their debut to becoming the longest-reigning tag team champions in WWE history, you know that Jimmy and Jey weren't just brothers by blood. They were brothers in battle, partners in crime, and two halves of the same beating heart. They moved in sync, finished each other's sentences, and created magic inside that ring that only comes from a lifetime of shared experiences. 622 days as undisputed WWE Tag Team Champions. Let that sink in. That's not just a number on a record book. That's nearly 2 years of dominance, of proving night after night that when the Usos step between those ropes, excellence isn't just expected, it's guaranteed. But here's the brutal truth that nobody wants to face. All the accolades in the world, all the main event matches, all the Hall of Fame credentials mean absolutely nothing when you get that phone call in the middle of the night. The accident happened on what should have been just another ordinary evening. No cameras rolling, no crowds chanting their names, just regular life happening the way it does for everyone else. But fate had other plans, and in one terrible moment, everything changed forever. The details are still emerging, and out of respect for the family's privacy during this impossibly difficult time, we're not going to speculate or dive into the gruesome specifics. What we do know is that Jey Uso lost his brother, his tag team partner, his best friend, and a huge piece of his own identity all in one devastating blow. And if you think that sounds unbearable, you're absolutely right, because it is. Here's something that people outside the wrestling business don't always understand. When you're part of a wrestling family like the AGONY dynasty, you're not just connected by last names and DNA. You're connected by a legacy that spans generations, by the weight of expectations that would crush most people, and by a bond that's been forged in training rings since before you could even spell superplex. The AGONY family tree reads like a who's who of professional wrestling royalty. The Rock, Roman Reigns, Rikishi, Yokozuna, Umaga, and of course the Usos. This family doesn't just participate in wrestling history. They create it, they live it, and they bleed it. So when tragedy strikes one member of this family, it reverberates through the entire wrestling community like an earthquake that measures off the Richter scale. Now let's talk about what this means for Jey Uso moving forward, because that's the question everyone's asking, even though it feels almost disrespectful to even think about wrestling at a time like this. How do you step back into that ring knowing your brother won't be there? How do you hit your entrance music when half of your theme song is now a ghost? How do you perform the moves you've executed together thousands of times when muscle memory keeps expecting your partner to be there for the hot tag? The honest answer is you probably don't, at least not right away, and maybe not ever in the same way again. Grief doesn't follow a convenient schedule, and trauma doesn't care about television ratings or pay-per-view dates. Jey Uso is going to need time, space, and the kind of support that goes way beyond what any storyline could provide. But here's where the wrestling community shows its true colors because despite all the kayfabe and the worked shoots and the scripted rivalries, when real tragedy strikes, this business comes together like a family. We've already seen an outpouring of support from every corner of the wrestling world. Current superstars, legends, competitors from rival promotions, everyone putting aside the fake feuds to acknowledge a very real loss. Because at the end of the day, professional wrestlers understand something that casual fans might not fully grasp. They understand that every time you step into that ring, you're trusting your opponent with your life. They understand that behind every character is a real person with real feelings and real families. And they understand that when one of their own is hurting, you show up, you speak up, and you stand up. WWE has already made it clear that Jey Uso has all the time he needs to process this tragedy and begin the impossible task of learning to live with this loss. There's no pressure to return, no expectation to show up and pretend everything's fine for the sake of entertainment. And honestly, that's exactly how it should be, because some things are bigger than wrestling. Some losses cut so deep that no amount of crowd reactions or championship opportunities can fill that void. The fact that WWE is prioritizing Jey's well-being over business considerations shows a level of humanity that we need to see more often in this industry. Let's also take a moment to remember Jey Uso not as a statistic or a headline, but as the performer who gave us countless unforgettable moments. The man who could deliver a super kick so crisp it sounded like a gunshot. The entertainer who could work a crowd into a frenzy with nothing but charisma and timing. The family man who was building his own legacy while honoring the legacy of those who came before him. Jey wasn't just Jey's brother or Roman's cousin or part. So what happens next for Jey Uso and for the bloodline? Honestly, that's a question that doesn't need answering right now. Maybe Jey eventually returns to the ring and finds a way to honor his brother's memory through his performances. Maybe he steps away from wrestling entirely to focus on healing and family. Maybe he finds a middle path that allows him to continue his career while processing his grief in whatever way works for him. All of those options are valid, and none of them are anyone's business to judge or dictate. What matters right now is that a man is grieving, a family is shattered, and the wrestling community is rallying around them with love and support. This is WWE Extreme, reminding you that behind every larger-than-life character is a real person with real struggles. Thanks for watching, and please keep the Anoa'i family in your thoughts during this incredibly difficult time.